Hello, I'm Henry Keane and we are UATV English. We're online to give you the Ukrainian perspective of war. Watch in the episode. US weapons to Ukraine halted again. What's next? Russia mass attacked Ukraine with missiles as each night as before. Ukraine to produce weapons in Europe. Please comment and subscribe to our channel while watching it. By doing so, you indeed help us to fight off criminal Russian aggression. And welcome to the news polls. On July 4th, during a time of uncertainty, let's put it that way, about defense weaponry supplies, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy had a long-awaited phone call with US President Donald Trump. Diplomatic sources say the two leaders discussed defense cooperation and the future of United States military aid as Kyiv faces delays in receiving key weapons from Washington and during the every night Russian terror.
The conversation with US President Donald Trump was very important and useful. I congratulated President Trump and the entire American people on Independence Day. Today we discussed the situation, Russian airstrikes and, more broadly, the situation on the front lines. President Trump is very well informed, and I thank him for his attention to Ukraine. We discussed possibilities for air defense and agreed that we will work to increase the protection of our skies. We agreed on a meeting between our teams. We discussed mutual purchases and investments. We exchanged views on the diplomatic situation and joint work with America and other partners. Volodymyr Zelenskyy, President of Ukraine, on Telegram.
On this July 4th, we sincerely congratulate you, the people of the United States of America, on your Independence Day. We in Ukraine celebrate the highest of human values, that of freedom, democracy and national unity that this day stands for. From the bottom of 40 million Ukrainian hearts, we thank American people for their stance for Ukraine and the United States government, the Congress and the Senate support during Ukraine's most difficult times that are not, unfortunately, over yet. On contrary, this is life of yesterday's night in Kyiv. July 4th is the day when we all have a great opportunity to build something that is going to last for the generations to come. Peace. This is why we kindly encourage you, dear Americans, to pick up your phones and call your senators and congresspeople so to make America great now and demand of them to be supporting us in Ukraine with defense weaponry Ukraine urgently requires to defend the same human values that are enshrined in your American Constitution. Happy Independence Day. Yours truly, the UATV English team. And Washington continues to provide weapons to Ukraine. That's according to United States President Donald Trump, who spoke to reporters at Joint Base Andrews in Washington. Trump also emphasized that support for Kyiv is ongoing, despite concerns about the depletion of US stockpiles.
We haven't suspended supplies. We are giving weapons, but we have given so many weapons. But we are giving weapons and we are working with them and trying to help them. Biden emptied out our whole country, giving them weapons, and we have to make sure that we have enough for ourselves. Donald J. Trump, President of the United States.
No country will be able to stop Ukraine on its path to European nation. That's what President Zelenskyy said during a briefing with EU leaders. He stressed, however, that Ukraine obviously needs support to move forward. For her part, Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen, whose country has just taken over the EU Council presidency, noted that Kyiv and Brussels are already working on the best way to move ahead.
That's why we need support. And I think nobody can stop Ukraine in this way, any one country. And of course, it depends on unity in EU, such decisions. So from our side, we will do everything. And we need support from all other leaders in EU.
But for now, enlargement of the European Union is crucial. Volodymyr has already spoken about how important it is for Ukraine. And I would like to add for the rest of Europe as well, because it will bring stability to the European continent, having Ukraine as a member. The concrete steps, I can't share that with you yet. Of course, we are thinking about what is the best way forward. It's my feeling that the vast majority of the member states are in favor of Ukrainian membership of the European Union.
Well, amen to that, and some maybe good news for you. United States President Donald Trump said he's not happy with how his phone call with dictator Putin went. He spoke to reporters at Joint Base Andrews in Washington. Trump said they talked about Ukraine and Iran and that he wants the war in Ukraine to end soon.
We had a call. It was a pretty long call. We talked about a lot of things, including Iran. And we also talked about, as you know, the war with Ukraine. And I'm not happy about that. I'm not happy about that. No, I didn't make any progress with them today at all.
During a tense 4-hour meeting between China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi and the EU's top diplomat Kaja Kallas, Beijing's true stance on the war in Ukraine became clear. According to the South China Morning Post, China sees a Russian defeat, whatever that means, as unacceptable, raising concerns in Brussels about Beijing's real role in the conflict, despite its official claims of neutrality.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi told the European Union's top diplomat on Wednesday that Beijing didn't want to see a Russian loss in Ukraine because it feared the United States would then shift its whole focus to Beijing as the war in Ukraine drags on. Wang's reported comments suggested that Russia's war in Ukraine may serve China's strategic needs as focus is deviated away from Beijing's mounting preparation to launch its own possible invasion into Taiwan. From the South China Morning Post publication, citing sources familiar with the conversation.
At least 69% of the Russian economy is in stagnation, according to the Foreign Intelligence Service of Ukraine. Deep crisis processes are observed in the coal industry, oil refining, construction, automotive industry, and logistics. These sectors alone account for about 17% of the total revenue of the Russian federal budget. The intelligence agency notes 52% of the Russian economy is in a state of real stagnation, primarily in the manufacturing sector.
The main reason is that more than 40% of Russian enterprises have liabilities that are 3 times higher than their profits. At this, working capital is increasingly dependent on accounts payable, as bank lending is both too expensive and virtually unavailable. In order to conceal the real statistics data and prevent panic in Russian society about the financial situation, the Russian government decided to classify information about the economy and foreign trade as state secret. From now on, only selective indicators favorable to the authorities will be published to give hope to the public, from the report of the Foreign Intelligence Service of Ukraine.
And to the more pleasant news, no doubt, on 4th of July, Ukraine and Russia carried out another round of prisoner swap. Defenders under the age of 25, wounded and seriously ill defenders, as well as civilians, were released from captivity. The authorities do not specify the moment the number of people returned this time, but it is known that they are soldiers and civilians alike. The youngest released defender was only 20 years old and the oldest was 59. In addition to soldiers and sergeants, officers were also returned, according to the coordination headquarters for the treatment of the prisoners of war. Amongst those released today are the defenders of Mariupol, who have been held in captivity since 2022, and in general most of those released had been in captivity for more than 3 years. Ukrainians who defended the country in the Donetsk, Kharkiv, Luhansk and Kherson sectors have returned home. If it comes as a surprise to any, really, the war is no longer limited to Ukrainian territory only. Drone attacks are becoming more and more frequent inside Russia itself. UAVs attack the Moscow region and Moscow and Rostov regions. In Azov, windows were shattered in residential area. Local media also reports that the Azov optical mechanical plant was attacked again. Meanwhile, in the Moscow region, a large-scale fire was observed. Drones attacked the city of Sergiev Posad, although details have not been yet disclosed. And a daily update, more than 1,024,000 now soldiers have been lost by the Russian criminal army since this criminal beginning of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, as of today. According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, in the last 24 hours alone, the defense forces eliminated 1,120 occupied troops. In addition, they managed to destroy 2 tanks and 10 armored vehicles. Half 100 artillery systems were also disabled. More than 200 Russian drones were downed, and more than 100 transport units and special military equipment were also destroyed. Music to my ears. Well, I hate to break it to some in American administration and also in European one like that, but that massive Russian terror attack on sleeping Ukrainian cities overnight is a direct consequence of insufficient air defense systems, as simple as that. Putin is a thug, a monster and ICC-indicted criminal, by the way, and is not going to stop unless stopped. Ukraine has been warning for months that without a steady supply of Western weaponry, we can't adequately protect our cities from Russian terror, drones and ballistic missiles. The shortage of anti-aircraft systems leaves millions of Ukrainians exposed, and Russia is taking, of course, advantage of that. Overnight, Russia launched a massive terror strike against Kyiv. Authorities in the Ukrainian capital report 19 injuries, of which 14 have been hospitalized. Amongst other 5-story buildings was partially damaged, and the roof of a 7-story building also caught fire. Another fire broke out following the impact of Russian kamikaze drone on a 14-story high-rise. This was a terror attack all over the city. There is no sense to give you, the names of the streets. You pick up almost any street in the Kyiv city and you find the aftermath of a Russian terror there. Warehouses, garage vehicles, private houses and administrative offices on fire. The railroad damaged, causing delays to passenger trains. Russian terror and nothing but terror. Kyiv neighboring regions were of course targeted overnight just as well by the Russian terror shelling. Near the town of Bucha, as if what happened there already was not enough, the residential buildings were damaged and the private houses. Firefighters, as you can see, extinguished fires on the roofs of the multi-storied buildings and private property, but luckily no casualties or injuries were reported so far. Overnight and this morning, the defense forces shot down 14 Russian drones also over the Dnipro region. As a result of the drone attack, private houses in the Dnipro district were damaged. The Nikopol city district was attacked by Russian artillery and FPV drones. According to the regional military administration, infrastructure and private houses were also damaged. Poltava region also happened to get its share of Russian night terror. There, 2 people injured by downed drones debris. The regional military administration confirms that it was a day before when Russian drone also killed 2 and wounded 50 in Poltava. Ukraine may soon become Europe's defense workshop as US arms supplies slow down or may be slowing down. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen is urging EU nations to fund Ukraine's growing weapons industry, calling it, I quote, faster, better and cheaper than the rest, end of quote. And during his visit to Denmark, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy also confirms a joint arms production deal is already in the works. Please look into the report for details.
Strengthening Ukraine's defense capabilities and advancing its EU integration were the main topics discussed by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy during his visit to Denmark. He attended the official ceremony marking the start of Denmark's presidency of the Council of the European Union. Denmark took over from Poland on July 1st, and its presidency will continue until the end of the year. Under the slogan, "A strong Europe in a changing world," the Danish presidency will focus on ensuring Europe's security, competitiveness, and environmental sustainability. According to President Zelenskyy, Ukraine is technically ready to open negotiations on 3 negotiation clusters as part of its EU accession process. In the defense sector, preparations are underway for a joint weapons production agreement in Denmark.
There is also clear progress in joint weapons production, and this is not only about the very good Danish model of investing in Ukraine. We are also preparing agreements for joint production. in Denmark.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen emphasized the need for a strategic rethink of EU defense policy. They stressed that supplying weapons to Ukraine is an investment in the European Union's security and that Ukraine's armed forces are holding back a threat to all of Europe.
We will deliver 2 million shells to Ukraine by the end of the year. We also invested 2.1 billion euros to strengthen Ukraine's defense right now. And important is the origin of this money. We're doing this by using the windfall profits from immobilized Russian assets. So in practice, Russia is paying for the weapons Ukraine is using. But Ukraine needs more. And for that, we have SAFE. SAFE for joint procurement. This money can be taken by member states and be invested in the Ukrainian defense industry. It will strengthen the defense industry. The products are better, more intelligent, cheaper, and come faster.
Ukraine has production capacity reserves in its defense industry, which, according to Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen, is working faster, better, and more affordably than in many other countries. Europe must rearm by 2030, boost its defense industry capabilities, and enhance joint procurement by removing all obstacles. EU countries should financially support Ukraine's defense sector to ramp up ammunition production and compensate for halted U.S. arms supplies. The EU should also speed up Ukraine's accession to the EU and NATO, strengthen sanctions against Russia, and place more orders with Ukraine's military industry. Denmark is also considering relocating part of Ukraine's defense production to other European countries, particularly to Denmark, as a way to support the industry.
War in Ukraine has never only been about Ukraine, it's about Europe. And therefore, if we are to protect Ukraine and Europe and the transatlantic alliance, we have to ensure that Ukraine gets the help that you need. So, of course, all of us hope that US will continue their support for Ukraine and, because of Ukraine, for Europe.
President Zelenskyy also noted that during his visit to Denmark, a memorandum was signed on the joint production of drones with American companies. The agreement will allow Ukraine to scale up production, particularly of interceptor drones, to defend against the constant attacks by Russian drones on peaceful Ukrainian cities. Zelenskyy emphasized that some Ukrainian defense companies will gain access to new technologies, which will enable expansion of their manufacturing capacity.
We've finally signed a very serious contract. We're counting on being able to take down a large number of Shahed drones. I believe this is a strong start. We also agreed that some of our manufacturing facilities will gain access to these technologies, which I think will speed up our ability to scale up production.
Production of Ukrainian weapons in Denmark could begin as early as this fall, according to Danish Defense Minister Troels Lund Poulsen. At the NATO summit on June 24th, the defense ministers of Ukraine and Denmark signed an agreement, paving the way for joint production of Ukrainian weapons on Danish territory. Denmark is considered one of the initiators of the so-called Danish model, a military aid approach that involves investing directly in Ukraine's defense production. Reported by Victoria Smirnova, UATV News.
Well, that was it for today. My name is Ernie Keane and we are News Pulse at UATV English. We thank you so very much for your time and for your attention. We appreciate that a lot as you help us to make Ukrainian voice to be heard worldwide. Please join the fight for freedom and sovereignty by subscribing to our channel. Hope to see you with us very soon. Stay tuned and goodbye.